Good morning, everyone. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to the 18th Annual Marilyn A. Papp Chinese Painting Seminar. I'm Janet Baker, Curator Emerita of Asian Art at Phoenix Art Museum. Along with my esteemed colleagues, I'm delighted to host this wonderful program, and I'd like to introduce you to the other people who have helped to make it possible. And I ask that those staff members please raise your hand when I mention your name. My esteemed colleague, Dr. Claudia Brown, who is a professor of art history at Arizona State University. Thank you, Claudia. My colleague, Colin Pearson, standing over there. Colin is consulting curator of Asian art at Phoenix Art Museum now. Thank you, Colin. And Tiffany Lippincott, over there, who is curator of education at Phoenix Art Museum. Thank you all for your help in bringing this program together. I'd like to just briefly mention, we would much appreciate if you would please either turn your devices off or to mute for the duration of this program. Thank you. We are truly honored to have today as our guest speaker, Dr. Shen Kuiyi, who is Professor of Art History, Theory, and Criticism at the University of California in San Diego. His presentation, Literati Painting, Bunjinga, and if you don't know what that is, you'll be finding out soon, Bunjinga and Sino-Japanese Exchanges in the Early 20th Century. This will be followed by a short break of about 10 or 15 minutes. And just so you know, if you exit through the open glass doors, an immediate hard left will take you to a water fountain and the restrooms. And then following our break, we will have a viewing and discussion of Chinese paintings in the Phoenix Art Museum's collection. Joining this discussion will be Dr. Julia F. Andrews. Would you raise your hand? Thank you, Julia. Who is Distinguished Professor Emerita and Academic Professor at The Ohio State University. Dr. Andrews was last year's visiting scholar for the Papp Chinese Painting Seminar. By the way, this is the first time we've had it in person in 4 years, so we're delighted to have everybody here in person. Very briefly, this presentation will elucidate Chinese literati painting, which had strong impacts on Japanese art as early as the Southern Song period. That's going back almost 1,000 years, particularly with Zen painting and landscape styles. Although in the Meiji era, which is 1868 to 1912, was a key period in which Japanese artists readjusted their understanding of Chinese literati painting traditions, there was still a gap between Chinese and Japanese tastes and the evaluation of painting styles. But by the end of that Meiji period and the beginning of the Taisho period, 1912 to 1926, the two sides seemed to gradually find common ground. By the end of the 1920s and the early 1930s, however, so these are rapid changes in a short period of time, Chinese painting turned towards a more culturally nationalistic direction rather than towards the more cosmopolitan modernism promised by new directions in literati painting. I hope you will all join me in welcoming Dr. Shen Kuiyi to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. First I want to thank the Marin A. Papp Fund for supporting this seminar, and also thank you very much Dr. Claudia Brown and Janet Baker for inviting me here, and also thank the Colin and the staff of the museum. And my talk, I think you already know, is about literary painting and Japanese so-called Bunjinga, the same as means literary painting. and the Sino-Japanese Exchange. In the most of the fundamental definition, literati painting in China is the self-expressive and also sometimes rather abstract visual art of educated class. In China, during the reign of the Kangxi Emperor, is about the 1661 to 1722, the literary styles of the four wands became the orthodox for court artists and led to the particular and arguably distorted understanding of the literary painting in the late imperial China. The two older ones, Wang Shiming and Wang Hui, are the Han Chinese scholar officials and disciples of the brilliant late Ming painters, connoisseurs and official Dong Qichang, who was the center of the who was the center of the culture that redefined the China's artistic canon in their own time. From the theoretical point of view, Dong Qichang's greatest significance was his promotion of the doctrine of the Northern School and the Southern School, in Chinese called the Nanbeizhong, which in the analogy to the Zen Buddhism, and also praised the Southern Enlightenment of the Southern School, lineage of the literary painters, and condemned the dullness of the Northern School, the artisans and the court artists. By the virtue of this condemnation, importance of the traditional Chinese painting, particularly those of the Mayuan and the Shaokui, acted in the 1180 to 1230, their landscape style of the Southern Song court, and also the Zhe School style associated with the Ming court, were the declared off limits. The two older ones, they responded faithfully to this formulation by basing on the major parts of the major parts of the product and also often the monotonous painting output of the style of the single yuan literati, Wang Gong Wang. And Wang Shiming's grandson, the Wang Yuanqi, was appointed as a court painter connoisseurs by the Kangxi Emperor, a position in which he authenticized the work in the imperial collections and supervised the editing of the massive encyclopedia of the writings of the Chinese painting and the calligraphy, the Pei Wenzai Shuhua, the Pei Wenzai Encyclopedia of the calligraphy and the painting. Wang Hui, the disciple of the Wang Jie, who the connoisseurs and also commissioned by the court to take charge of the pictorial documents, the Kangxi era Southern inspection tours. At his best, in the 17th century, the work of the Wang Hui and the Wang Yuanqi, such painting possessed the flash of the innovative brilliance, but by the late 19th century, the four-wand style was as the lifeless as it was widespread. For this reason, it became the easy target for the cultural reformers of the late Qing and the early Republican China. Chinese literary painting strongly impacted on Japanese art, first in the Southern School, Southern Song Dynasty, with the Zen painting and also the landscape painting style. During the Ming and the early Qing dynasties, another wave of the Chinese influence into the Japan, including an elaborate style of the bird and flower paintings, which had a little connection with literary painting in China, but was appreciated by Japanese Bunjinga and the Japanese literati with their own kind of interest. Since the civil kind of service examination system has never existed in Japan, Japanese Bunjinga had never been bounded by the canon of the literary painters of Dongqichang defined. Even though they used the term of the Nanga, it means the southern painting, which directly referred to his Dongqichang theory. Therefore, almost starting from the beginning, we see some difference between the art of Chinese literati and those of the Japanese Bunjinga. Even the painting that the Japanese produced under the headings of the literati and the southern were in many cases far from these kind of style we see in China. The gap between their notion of literary painting and the reality in which they lived was wide indeed. Especially in the Tokugawa period, under the policy of deliberate kind of national isolation, when the people were forbidden to travel to China, the Nanga artists, the Southern School artists in Japan, they were forced to rely on the woodblock menu of painting style. A hodgepodge kind of imported paintings and the teachings of the group of the Chinese artists who visited Nagasaki, such as the Chen Yuanyun, who stayed in the Nagasaki for 30 years, from the 1638 to 1671, and Shen Nanping, who were there for the late 1731 to 1733. His student, the Song Ziyan, from the 1758 to 1760, and in Fuzhou, who would visit Nagasaki multiple times between the 1720 to 1747. Their painting styles were widely eclectic. Most of their paintings were quite decorated. Although the so-called Nagasaki school had nothing to do with Nanga, but being the Chinese, it was substituted into the rhetoric in Japan. It's also particularly the cost some kind of the faculty that's understanding it's called kind of fault kind of understandings of the Chinese literary painting. To most the Japanese painter, the understanding of the further developing the Chinese literary tradition largely relied on the imagination. Thus, some the Nanga painters, they seem to develop a different kind of view of natural and also painting, such as the Uragami Gyokudo and also the Yosabuso, who fiercely utilize the Chinese tradition, including its themes, formats, and style, without being bounded by it, to suggest the Japanese as China. Direct artistic exchange between China and Japan, however, resumed in the second half of the 19th century with the reopening of the trade following the Opium War and also Admiral Perry's expedition. The renewal of trade and cultural exchange after so many centuries of the isolation led to a dramatically new kind of understandings in both countries. From the time of the Edo and the Bakufu sent, for the first time, an official diplomatic and commercial expedition to Shanghai on the May 6, 1862 to 1912, the end of the Meiji era, the Japanese population outstripped the British to become the largest foreign group in Shanghai. The number of the Japanese dealing with the art rapidly increased to hundreds, including 53 artists and 200 antique shop owners in Shanghai. When Japanese Nanga artist who lived in Shanghai, Staloza, played a very important role in the interaction between the Japanese merchants and also collectors and the Shanghai painters in the art circle. Yasuda was born in a samurai, the doctor's the family in Takase in the Mino. He learned painting from the Nagasaki painter Somon Tetsuzon, or Tetsuzon Somon, sometimes called. When he was young, the Yasuda studied with the Tetsuzon Somon. He is one of the earliest Japanese artists to arrive in Shanghai. The exact date when he arrived in Shanghai is not very clear, but definitely in the 1860s. He stayed in Shanghai about 9 years. During the period, he studied painting and calligraphy and made friends with some of the Chinese artists who had been to the Nagasaki, such as the landscape painter Xu Yuting, and also the Wang Daozi, and also Lu Yingqiang. It is said he also studied painting with the Shanghai landscape painter Hu Gongshou. At the time, he entered the two Shanghai the people who were also disciple of the Taisho and also the Nangai, the Ongbin, and also the Kansan. They were known as respectively to the so-called San Go and the Gosi and Gogo and also Gosan in Japanese. After he returned to Japan in 1873, he became the famous in the Japanese art circle as the Akakura and the Seiko, Akura Seiko, and also Nagasaki, Nagarishi, the Kosei. Wang Xiyun and another the person and the scholar in his 1883 as a writing called Songnan Mumin mentioned Yasuda Rodan as the artist who did calligraphy and painting in Shanghai. His painting also described as being primarily ink fluorescence and also small-scale landscape in the style of the Wu, and also the other kind of the Ming Dynasty painters. His calligraphy followed the style of the Chinese calligraphy Kuiyi of the 8th century, and sometimes transcribed the short poems. Many events in the Chinese art world were transmitted back to Japan through his works. During that period, many the Japanese artists visited China. In 1876, the Japanese oil painter and Takashi Yuichi traveled to Shanghai and also visited Zhangxiong in 1878. Number painter and Nagao Muboku also visited Shanghai. At the time, the Hu Gongshou and Zhang Xiong, the two Shanghai artists, were obviously the favorite artists among the Japanese collectors. The Japanese writer and also merchant Kishida Ginko actually visited Shanghai in 1867. In the trip, he received at least one painting from the gift from as a gift from Zhang Xiong, a work called the Painting of the Songjiang. In 1880, Okada Tokushiro published called the Seijin, the Chojishou. That fool, it means the Qing painter Zhang Xiong's painting manual in Japan. In the following year, after spending 3 years in Shanghai, Nagao Muboku actually returned to Japan and published the two books. And one is the painting manual. On the screen you can see is the painting manual of the Hu Gongshou and Zhang Xiong. When he was in Shanghai, he was also very close to Hu Gongshou and Zhang Xiong, and the owner of the art shop of Guxiangshi, Wu Tianmei. With his taste for Japanese Bunjinga, he respected Zhang Xiong and Hu Gongshou as the master of the late Qing art. However, the artistic exchange between China and Japan was not one way. The many Chinese painters went to Japan during the 1880s, including the Luo Qing and also the Gu Yun, and also the Wang Ying and the Wang Yanmei and the Pu Hua and Chen Manshou and the others. The Hu Tianmei and also the Wei Zhushen among them. And also Pu Hua actually at that time went to went to Japan in 1881 and returned to Shanghai in summer of the same year. At least one record, his painting sold in Japan, survived. During the period, Wang Ying and this Wang Yimei stayed in Japan for many years. He arrived in Japan in 1880 and lived in Kyoto and Osaka. During the time, he became the very good friend of the Japanese scholar, the Fujisawa, the Nangoku, and was very famous in Nanga circle. The Wang Yimei published 3 books in Japan, and the Yimei Shipu, this is the Yimei's painting manual on stones, in Osaka in 1881, and the Yimei Huapu, and in the 1882, and also Yimei and Papp Renwu, and that means the menu, Yimei's painting menu of the figure painting. His success in Japan actually made his reputation in China. In the Suzhou painter Gu Yun, who made his home in Shanghai, went to Nagoya in 1888. Upon the invitation of the Japanese Nanga painters, he made the painting menu called the Nanga Yoshiki, which became very influential in Japanese Nanga circle, and was included in this Shiga, this Nanga Taisho, is this kind of the encyclopedia of the Southern School painting of China. Hu Tianmei, and also called Hu Zhang, went to Nagoya in 1878. There he saw the Japanese saw in Japan. He is kind of increasingly powerful, and also the prosperous. And when he returned to Shanghai, he found a newspaper called the Su Bao, which later actually promotes the political kind of reform in China. In 1882, because he was involved with the Kang-Youwei, the constitutional reform effort, he was declared as a wanted man by the Qing court. So he and his Japanese wife, the Ikoma Edson, actually fled first to Kobe, and then finally settled in the Kanizawa. He died there in 1899. After he moved to Japan, he relied on selling his own painting for a living, and became friendly with many Nanga painters. Even now, there are many his work surviving in Kanizawa. His works also included in the Shina Nanga Taisho. The activities of these artists were famous in Japan. On the one hand, accommodated themselves to the cultural aspiration of the Southern Japanese of the time. On the other hand, they helped the Japanese to acquire a deeper understanding of the contemporary Chinese art circles. Thus, this Kishida Ginko's letter of the 1880s showed the more objective judgment of the Shanghai art world than his writing in the 1872 when the early trip to China. When, based upon other people's opinion, he sought to obtain the Hu Gongshou's painting. I quoted this Kishida Ginko's writing in the 1880s. In the evolution of the Japanese, Hu Gongshou is the most famous painter in China. Actually, he was only a mediocre art painter. That's because the Japanese do not use their eyes, but only their ears. I don't know who bought Hu Gongshou's painting back and also promoted his pen so vigorously into the #1 position. In fact, there were several levels, and beneath Zhang Xiong, always you can see here on the Kishida Ginko, really appreciate the Zhang Xiong's the paintings here. And in another letter to his friend, the Kishida Ginko, also wrote in the same year, he described the Shanghai art market. He said, in Shanghai, market has become vulgar and commercial, and lost its aura of the literary status. They openly posted their price list, the price all based on size of the paper, counted in inch or feet. Even such famous artists as Zhang Xiong and Hu Gongshou do the same thing. In Shanghai, Zhang Xiong earned a very high reputation, but Hu Gongshou, although he is very hot in Japan, smokes opium. Many of his paintings just lie there and are never finished, so he had quite a bad reputation. Among the calligrapher, Hu Jutan is very good. Compared to them, and Wei Shen, who was recently famous in Japan, can only be considered low class. Hu Tianmei and Zhu Menglu, Zhu Chen, and also Yang Guoren. Although the recent the migrants to Shanghai, they all painted very well. However, their way of setting their price list is completely different from Japanese custom. It's almost like the Japanese fabric shop. End quote. Through the direct contact with Chinese painters and seeing the reality of the artwork in China of their own time, Japanese were also able to selectively adjust their imagined vision of China, as they had learned it only from the old books and also painting catalogs. By the end of the Meiji and the beginning of the Taisho period, that is around the 1910, Japan underwent a great change. It managed to have the formerly kind of unequal British-Japanese commerce and navigation treaty revised in 1894, and to emerge as the victor of the Sino-Japanese and the Russian-Japanese War, and also gained the confidence in its ability to obtain the status of the industrialization nation, which power kind of the comparable to the leading Western countries. At the same time, Japan attained a certain level of the social and cultural maturity after undergoing the tumultuous years of the exposure of the Western culture. Wavering between the Western and the Eastern value, the rapid modernization, and had achieved a reasonably objective viewpoint of the re-examine themselves. Under this kind of circumstance, a wave of the re-evaluation and also re-examine of the Bunjinga or Nanda emerged in the 1910s. In 1880s, Nanda actually was criticized strongly by the Fenalusa as the old model lack of the formal harmony, while he promoted this synthesized this kind of Nihonga painting with a good point of the Western painting, especially on those style of the Nihonga painter like the Konan Kogai and also the Hashimoto the Gaho. Their painting was introduced kind of the atmospheric perspective and the chiaroscuro to Japanese landscape and also the figurine painting. During this period, we see the continuation of the artistic change between the Japanese and Chinese art circles. If we say the Meiji era mainly was a period in which the Japanese artists they readjusted their own understanding of the Chinese literary painting and tradition, and there still was a gap between the Chinese and Japanese to the taste and the evaluation of the painting style. Around the 1910, the two sides seemed to gradually find the common ground. This common ground is the appreciation of the study of the epigraph and the epigraphics, the styles of painting, of the calligraphy. Although this trend can be traced back to the very early in the middle of the 19th century by the Literati Painting, you can see here on the right of this early in the Meiji period. But not until the Yang Shoujing, the Chinese, the Qing court diplomat and assisted to the Chinese ambassador, brought more than 12,000 rabbins of the ancient studies to Japan. In 1880, he started to teach on the Sixth Dynasty, this epigraphy, and also the appreciation of the epigraphic style of the calligraphy, set up the foundation in the Japanese scholar and the art circle. During this process, many people on both sides played a very important role. Kusakabe Meikaku and also the Iwaya Ichiroku studied the calligraphy of the Sixth Dynasty's stage style with Yang Shoujing. Kusakabe later became the founder of the state school of the calligraphy in Japan. In March 1891, the Kusakabe went to China and also met the Wu Dachen, the famous connoisseur, and also the collector, and also the epigraphic calligrapher. And Kusakabe met the Wu Dachen and Yang Shen, and also Yu Ye. Kusakabe, on this trip, Kusakabe also got to know Wu Changshi and studied calligraphy with Wu Changshi. He deeply admired Wu's calligraphy and the seal carvings. After he went back to Japan, he spread Wu's name in the art circle of Japan and introduced many of his students and friends to Wu. Kusakabe kept his friendship with Wu for more than 30 years. When he died in 1922, Wu wrote an inscription in his favorite seal script style for Kusakabe's tablet. In 1900, the Japanese calligraphy and the seal carver Kuiyi Shen traveled to Shanghai to meet Wu Changshi. Kusakabe Shen, a native of Kyoto, studied calligraphy with Kusakabe Meikaku and also Iwaya and Ichiroku. The influence by his teacher, the Kuiyi also admired Wu Changshi's art. In 1897, Kuiyi mailed his work to Wu Changshi to ask his advice. Unexpectedly, Wu Changshi responded to him very quickly with appreciation for his work and encouraged him to come to China to meet. 3 years later, Kuiyi with Tanaka Keitaro, owner of one of the art shop in Tokyo called Bunjinga, came to Shanghai. And Kuiyi became the Wu Changshi's student. The second time the Kuiyi went to China was in December 1902. This time he stayed in China for 2 months and spent most of the time in Hangzhou when the Seal Carving Society was established in 1904. Wu Changshi was selected as the director. Kuiyi and other Japanese scholars and calligraphers, Nangao Uzan, became the earliest foreign members of this society. From 1904 to 1931, Kuiyi went to China almost every year. He was also the very important person to promote Wu Changshi's art in Japan. Nangao Uzan on this Knight Conan and the Kano and the Naoki, they were considered 3 of the most famous scholars on Chinese studies in Japanese Kansai area in the time. In 1903, Nangao Uzan quit his job. And here we can see the major scholar of the Chinese studies in Japan, especially in the western parts of Japan, called Kansai area. In 1903, Nangao Uzan quit his job at the Tokyo on the Senior Normal School and the Tokyo Imperial University, and moved to Shanghai to work at Shanghai's commercial press as the translator and editor. The commercial press at that time is the largest publisher in China. As the editor and the translator, he was introduced to Wu Changshi by the Matsuzaki and this Tsuro, a Japanese dealer in Shanghai. Wu Changshi liked his personality and his poetry very much. So Nangao lived in Shanghai, in China, for almost a dozen years. He was a neighbor of the Wu Changshi for 3 years, from 1912 to 1914. And during the period, they often discussed art and compose a poem together. In 1912, Wu Changshi asked to write the ornamental inscription, the Yugu Weitu, or the disciple of antiquity, for the Museum of Fine Arts Boston. This one is still there in the front of the Chinese gallery in the MFA Boston. Although we don't have any kind of direct evidence regarding the means by which this invitation came, we know that time Wu Changshi and Nangao Wuzang actually lived on the same street. Akakura Tenshin, the curator of the Oriental art at Boston, was a longtime friend of the Nangao. In 1912, when the Akakura Tenshin came to China to buy artworks for the Boston Museum, he visited Shanghai in August. Nangao accompanied him to visit artists and buy art. There is no record of the meeting between Akakura Tenshin and Wu Changshi, but it is a reasonable assumption that it is through the Nangao the Akakura Tenshin asked Wu Changshi, one of the most famous artists in Shanghai at the time, to write something for the museum. In 1917, Nangao Wuzang, acting on the behalf of the Japanese literary painter Tomioka Kisai, asked Wu Changshi to carve a seal, the Dongguo Tongri Shen, it means born on the same day as Su Shi. Su Shi is one of the most famous the Song Dynasty calligraphy and the painter, and also literati. Tomioka Kisai was born on the 19th day of the 12th lunar month, the equivalent of the January 25th in the solar calendar. 800 years later, to the day after the Song, the scholar official painter Su Shi actually. So they have the same day, and the birthday with the same day. So this Tomioka Kisai that had already kind of venerated Su Shi's accomplishment so throughout his life, and was proud of his collection of the Su Shi painting and calligraphy. He named his own studio as the Su Studio. Studio of the gathering Su's writing, and also called called himself the Dongpo Pi, that means the Dongpo addicted. After that, he often used his the seals Wu Changshi colored for him on his painting. Although Kisai never met Wu Changshi, they had a written correspondence. In 1899, a great many Oregon bones were unearthed in Anyang, China. Kisai was extremely interested in this finding. Later, at the residence of the Yu of the Wang Bowei, who fled to Japan after 1911 revolution, Kisai saw many Oregon bones, steady rubbings, and antiques and paintings. This inspired some kind of change in his later painting style. Kisai's interest in the antiques was also somewhat similar to that of Wu Changshi, who was also fond of the epigraphy and the rubbings. Kisai and the son, Tomioka, the Kenzo, visited China many often after 1908, met Wu Changshi many times at the Xilin in Hangzhou and Shanghai. Wu Changshi painted many kinds of painting to the Nangao. Nangao, we just mentioned earlier, lived 3 years with him. So, like here, we see this painting as dedicated to this Nangao, such as this double cream and also the ink plum and plum blossom. When now back to Japan, Wu Changshi actually, especially dedicated this the plum blossom painting to him, and now this most of this kind of painting collected in the Kyoto National Museum. After Nagao returned to Japan, became one of the most important advocate of the Bunjinga in Japan. The famous Japanese painter and the Nanga painter, the Hashimoto Kansets, also visited Shanghai many times after 1913, and soon established a good relationship with the Shanghai painters. He participated in many kind of activities in Shanghai art circle, and soon became the friend of Wu Changshi and Wang Yiting. He and Wu Changshi often presented the poem to one another. Although in 1922, through the introduction of the Wu Changshi and Wang Yiting, Hashimoto Kansets actually got to know the Shanghai painter the Chen Shoutie. They're very young at that time, the seal cover and painter in Shanghai. The Hashimoto Kansets just invited the Chen Shoutie to Japan in the following years. In the 1926, the Hashimoto, also the Ishii, the Lingyo, and also the Kosei Hoan, and the other Japanese painters with the Chinese painter like the Wang Yiting and the Liu Haishu and the Chen Shoutie. They established the artist society called the Kuiyi Shen in Japanese, and had their first exhibition in Tokyo. In the same year, the Sino-Japanese Art Society was established in Shanghai. Its major members, including the Hashimoto Kansets, Wang Binghong, and Zhang Sanzhi, Zheng Wuchang, and Fang Jiekan. Another person who is very important is Emerita Segai, who was a professor of the East Asian art history at the Tokyo Art School, and the most enthusiastic advocate of the reviving Bunjinga style painting at the time. From 1921 to 1926, he visited China for 5 times. During his first time to China in 1921, he met Chen Shizhen, then a professor at the Beijing High Normal School and the Beijing Women's High Normal School. Chen Shizhen studied in Japan between 1902 and 1909, and witnessed the wave of the appreciation of the epigraphic style of art and the revival of Nanga painting of the time in Japan. And the result of their meeting was a landmark publication called A Study of the Literati Painting, which included Emerita Segai's early article, The Renaissance of the Literati Painting, and Chen Shizhen's article, The Value of the Literati Painting, published in 1922. Chen Shizhen promoted the idea of the ethic and the spiritual grounding for the literary painting, and significant in the context of his time. Chen Shizhen advocated a Chinese way of the painting that was not based on the practical skill of the rendering naturalistic subjects. He argued that literary painting was progressive by virtue of its conceptual similarities to the modern European painting. He thus demonstrated that the literary painting was not only capable of the making progress within the Chinese painting tradition, but also of the contributing to the world art through its intellectual and spiritual parallel with the most advanced contemporary European art practice. On the Chinese side, besides Chen Shizhen, several other peoples, such as Wu Changshi and Wang Yiting, also played a very important role at the time. As we already seen earlier, Wu Changshi, as the leading painter and calligrapher in the epigraphic styles, and also the leader of the late Shanghai school painting, was highly respected in both Japan and China in the 1910s and 1920s. As the successful businessman, the artist, and also the lay Buddhist activist, and also the revolutionary, Wang Yiting left the strong impact on every aspect of the Shanghai, the social networks at the time. In his remarkable career, however, his close relationship with Japan also the most interesting parts, which attracted wide attention of the scholars. Besides those who directly advocated reviving the re-evaluation literati or Nanga painting. The Luo Zhenyu was a prominent Chinese classical scholar, epigrapher, and a philologist, and also the antiquarian of the late Qing and the early Republican period. In 1911, the year of the Qing dynasty collapse, he was invited by a group of the Japanese scholars in Kyoto to visit Japan. As the Qing loyalists, this might be the best excuse for him to leave China at the time. In the following 8 years, he stayed in Kyoto, focusing on the scholarly research and publishing the books on the archaeological studies. With a little Qing loyalist and scholar, the Wang Guowei's help during his first 5 years in Japan, he turned down all the offers to be the lecturer at the Kyoto Imperial University, all the offers from the Republican Chinese government to be the editor of the Qing history. Rosemary concentrated on the study of the oracle bone on the inscriptions, Shang and the Zhou Barangs, and also the Shiguwen, the stone Yuan inscription. The result of this were the dozens of books published in 1916. These books extended to the highest level of the scholarship of the Chinese archaeology and the epigraphy. As the famous collector of the Chinese painting and the epigraphic objects in China, he had an exhibition in Japan before he exiled himself to Japan. So when he went to Japan, the art collectors, the circle, they already knew him very well, and also knew his rich collection quite well. He brought 12,000 items, including books, paintings, and other epigraphic items, with him to Japan, of which many were so-called the Nanga and the Southern School paintings. When he went to Japan, he saw the Nanga trends, and also he started to sell the Nanga painting in his collection to make a living and support his publications. Especially when he was on his book Nanzhong, the Yibo the Bai Wei. This was published in 1916. Nanga Wuzang actually wrote the preface, which gave the Luo Zhenyu the new face of the authority on Nanga painting. In his the self preface, he said he divided the century, and means the landscape painting, into the two parts to introduce and to interpret and display the two schools, Southern School and the Northern schools. The following year, he devoted himself to the cataloging, the painting, and the calligraphy. Thus, Luo Zhenyu also became one of the most important persons promoted the Southern School of the painting and abroad. He even borrowed money to buy paintings and other kind of antiques because he saw the price on the market at the time was very low. Every time he returned to China, he would buy paintings, especially those of the so-called Southern School and Nanga painting, to then brought to Japan. Although there were quite a few kind of the fake paintings among his the painting he bought, and also the sold in the Japanese market. Luo Zhenyu still contribute to the revival of the Nanga the painting at the time in a very unique way. We see this revival of this Nanga in Japan with the efforts of both China and Japan. Reached the peak in the 1920s. Many artists and scholars made a stylistic comparison between the Bunjinga and the Western Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, and they tried to find the creative kind of the elements from the Nanga. In 1920s, the advocating the returning Tokyo appeared in the Nihonga circle, such as the Imam Shiko, and the combine this kind of elements of the post-impressionist painting to form the new Nanga style painting in his work. The re-evaluation of the Literati painting in China, however, finally was no more than the unrealized fantasy. it didn't reach the same kind of result. The Chinese scholar and artists like Chen Shizhen and others hoped. Chen Shizhen hoped to bring the literary painting into the modern society by comparing it to the Western modern art and inputting the modernity into literary painting with the essential aesthetics of literary culture, the echoed ideas of the Japanese art circle in the 1910s. No matter whether from the on the Seigais, on the kind of side of the, or from the yoga painter, such as the Fujishima Takeji's, or the Tetsuro's painting. Both with the early kind of death of the Chen Shizhen and also the change of the general kind of political and cultural environment, the end of the 1920s and the early 1930s, Chinese painting turned in the more kind of culturally nationalistic directions, rather than the cosmopolitan modernism to which the Chen Shizhen and the others hoped at the time. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
Hi, that Tesoro Sugaro, I'm not understanding it wrong, but did he produce a lot of work and his books and everything abundant?
Who?
Just the last slide, the sumo wrestler.
Tetsugoro.
Yeah. Did he produce a lot of books? Are there a lot of books on him?
No, not himself, but he is now become very famous. So many books about him published.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know that before 20th century, there's like basically no concept of literati painting in Chinese art history. So this concept is basically invented by Japanese artists and scholars. Is that correct?
No, this is not correct.
Oh.
Yeah, later the painting started to be so-called literary painting. We'll say this term actually formalized by the Dong Qishan in the late Ming Dynasty.
Oh, okay. So the literati paintings, the school is invented in Ming Dynasty.
No, the literary painting can trace back to the Song Dynasty. Actually, according to the scholars in China, they believe that even back to the Tang Dynasty, they're like the artist and the poet. And the scholar Wang Wei, we consider the kind of the founder of the so-called literary painting at the time. But the literary painting that's really developed in the Song Dynasty became the most very important, associated with the new kind of a writing class of this so-called scholar official class. So this kind of the idea about the literary painting further developed in the after Song Yuan Dynasty period, then to the Ming Dynasty. This artist Dong Qishan kind of systematically trying to interpret this literary idea and also literary painting.
Also, is the concept of literary painting defined by Japanese artists the same thing with the Southern school of painting?
Yeah, this is the term. That's a term that I think the Japanese used as a very much from this Dong Qishan's kind of interpretation about Southern school and also the Northern school. Southern school linked to the literati, Northern school linked to the core painter or the artisans, the art. So the Japanese the understanding of the literary the painting actually from around the Chinese Ming Dynasty at that time adopted terms and also the start to use the term to develop a certain kind of idea in Japan, hence the painting, and follow this Chinese kind of literary painting style. But because later in Japan, have the twice kind of isolation period and cut relations with China, especially the later in the Tokugawa in the Edo period, to start from the 1633 on. This basically they locked the own kind of land and allowed the Japanese people to the abroad to China. So the only very few kind of this kind of the information came from China from the middle of the 17th century, since to the about the 19th century when the Japanese reopened in the 1862, the first time they opened to the outside world. So especially reconnected China, connected to China. So during this period, actually Japanese, basically their understanding of the Chinese painting is based on the early kind of the painting went to Japan, especially in the Ming Dynasty, kind of Southern Song style of painting, and the Zen painting went to Japan, and also the early kind of the understanding of the Chinese painting. So the later in the Tokugawa period, we should say the basically the developed based on their own kind of imagination. That's why the Japanese so-called literary painting or the Nanda painting, the style is quite different from Chinese painting. Many kind of developed in many kind of unique way, no matter in the themes and also brushworks. You will see it's not really the same as the literary painting. And later in the 19th century, that's why in the 19th century when they saw this, the late 19th, saw the Chinese, went to China to see what happened in China, actually quite shocked to them, and they find it actually the totally different kind of the way to understand the so-called literary painting and the matter in style or in the subjects. It's a very kind of the simplified way to answer this question.
I have a
Very-
follow-up question.
Sure.
So do you think like the concept of literati painting after 20th century in the Chinese art world, the concept of literati painting, is it influenced by the Japanese scholars and artists, or by their definition of literati painting?
I think you talk about in China or in the West?
In China.
In China. In China, not too much. Although we should say that still Japanese played a very important role in the first half of the 20th century, when the art history as the discipline is established in China. That means they start systematically interpreted the history of the Chinese painting or the history of Chinese art. That time, the Chinese art was strongly influenced by Japan. And the scholarship about the Chinese the painting history, like Chen Shizhen and also the Taisho, the first group, the art history book about the Chinese painting, actually directly adopted Japanese kind of the concept, actually the translation of the Japanese book. So we should say the Japanese interpretation about the Chinese painting history and also about the literary painting strongly influenced the Chinese art circle at that time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
In regards to the Oracle Bone, how did that become an inspiration to these artists?
Oracle Moon, yes, very good question. So Oracle Moon actually the funded in after this, started from the 17th century, had a very strong the movement to study the Chinese antiquities. The Chinese called 考证学. Based on this is the group of the Han Chinese scholars. My interpretation, the Han Chinese scholars kind of resistance to the Qing court and this kind of political pressure in the middle of the Qing dynasty. So study the Chinese their own history through this kind of the antiquities, especially like the bronze vessels and also the oracles or the kind of the stone stelaes, especially these kind of things, is the emphasize on the Han Chinese their own culture and own tradition there. So use this kind of resistance to the Qing courts, the kind of political pressure on the Han Chinese. So this kind of became very popular, especially to the 18th century. These kind of the trends only study the antiquities gradually expanded to the art world, first to the calligraphy, so later to the painting. So the oracles actually is a part of the study. The part of this kind of study the antiquities, the early writing, because the Chinese. We always say the Chinese calligraphy and the Chinese painting came from same origin, and the Chinese characters itself actually the kind of like the pictures, the kind of the characters. So the study the oracles actually can trace back to China, the earliest pictorial kind of the art. That's why the oracles actually interested in the artists, interested not only the scholars of the history and the scholars of the kind of the archaeology, but also the interest in Chinese artists very much.
Sorry, my question might sound a little bit like stupid, but I noticed that during your presentation, it's like mainly or almost all male artists being male scholars. included in this circle of either literati painting or the exchange, culture exchange of like Sino-Japan artist group?
This is a good question. This is also quite often we hear this question. Unfortunately, not too many. It's really just, China is a very long time, it's the kind of Confucian society, the male-dominated society, and the female is not encouraged into any kind of public kind of activities. Even we know that many the female actually study at home. They kind of home educated and very well educated. They compose poem, write calligraphy, painting, but never had their work shown in the public. That's the reason why they kind of in the kind of writings we didn't see these kind of things recorded about the activities and women artists and women. But in the Shanghai school, we should say the woman artist named Wu Shujuan in the beginning of the 20th century actually is kind of the exception. She became very famous in the Shanghai art circle with like Wu Changshen, Wang Yiting that time. And also she participated in the Chicago's kind of this international expo. Also won award outside, and later because in the early 20th century we also see the kind of the wave of the kind of the feminist kind of movement in China too, and many kind of women's magazine also published her work, and also we kind of start from that time start to see women artists that appeared in the public kind of the scenes. So yeah, in the early time, it's not many. You will see what we can do based on early kind of the writings, early texts. It's not many kind of women artists in the record.
Thank you very much.
Perhaps we should ask Professor Andrews to comment on that question.
Well, I mean, that was a very appropriate answer. I think there were women painters, but their work was considered a private matter inside. But in the period between about the establishment of the Ladies' Journal magazine in 1914 and in 1941, we see a real expansion of public-facing women artists. The journal editors were actively seeking them out to publish their work, and so we begin to see an expansion. We begin to see a few women faculty members at the Shanghai Art Academy and later at National Central University. Thank you. We do begin seeing them published, and we see them as members of art societies. The lists of members exhibiting and belonging to the newly established art societies in the first half of the 20th century also included many female artists. And perhaps kind of wrapping this all up, in 1948, a yearbook of Chinese art was published. I think it was envisioned as being an annual thing, but it was the only one ever published. And it included a number of historical documents, included histories of the art schools and listing of some of the faculty, but it also included a very interesting section on master-disciple workshops. And they would list the name of the master of the workshop and then all of the disciples in order of seniority or priority. And these included workshops. I mean, I shouldn't call them workshops, but these are literati painters who had disciples, and the people like Wu Fan, Zhang Daqian, sort of all the famous artists that you think of, Hong Bin Hong, and many of them now listed female artists among their disciples. And even more interesting is that there were some female masters who had disciples, both male and female disciples. Kuiyi Shen is one who comes right to my mind. So anyway, there was quite a lot of expansion in the first half of the 20th century. And then after 1949, things changed a bit. That's another story. Yeah.
Any further questions before we take a break? Yes? One more.
Thank you, Professor, for that wonderful talk. My question is about the painting manual, the woodblock printed painting manual. How did you come to know about them? And you mentioned that they were produced in Japan. So how were their later reception in China, if any? Thank you.
Yeah, painting manual started from about the Chinese Ming Dynasty. It's kind of more and more painting manual printed. Because of the development in public the printing industry in the Ming Dynasty, so make it possible. People can study painting. Not before that, study painting in China is always a master disciple system. You study with your teacher and also with a small kind of their own kind of studio to accept students to study. So the painting menu provided the very convenient way for the people, even without a teacher, you can just copy the painting menu, to learn the painting menu. But the painting menu not only for this, actually based on this later the people's kind of memoir and writings, some very famous artists that actually started learning painting from this from the painting menus. So the painting menu, I think start from the Ming Dynasty, late Ming Dynasty, became one of the most important kind of tools for people, especially the common people. Even without the teacher, you can study the painting. But in Japan, the projects became much more important because they isolate themselves without any kind of further this kind of connection with China during the Tokugawa period or even early one time the isolation period. So the painting menu became the only sense they know what the Chinese painting looks like. So that's the way I think they make them didn't know after this painting menu what happened in China. That's why I say the understanding of the Chinese painting, including the literary painting, will develop in a different way. It's these kind of costs. But the painting menu, on the other hand, provided very important kind of means for the Japanese artists to learn the so-called Chinese painting, especially literary painting. That's what it looks like.
As a follow-up, can you tell us were the manuals that were published in Japan also marketed in Shanghai?
Yeah.
I thought, I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, it is. This because like the Wang Yimei and this kind of the painting menus, because it becomes very popular. This happened actually just like the things become very famous in artists became quite famous and received the reputation in the abroad, and abroad then come back and raise their reputation in China. So Wang Yimei, actually the kind of the typical kind of examples here. Actually, he himself is not a kind of very famous artist in China before, but his reputation in Japan and so many followers and also so many painting menus dedicated to him. This in China we didn't find many artists, even famous artists, painting menu and their name. Wang Yimei have this, actually more than 3, and the painting menus have the painting menu stone and the plum blossom, and also the specifically dedicated to figuring painting menus. So these kind of painting menus become so popular in Japan. Then they find this artist, the famous in outside of China. So they reprinted their painting menu in China too, and became actually spread his name in China. This is the phenomenon we see in the many other famous artists too, like the Changshi, Qibaishi, and this kind of people. Also, they the reputation actually we should say make the great kind of the parts in their reputation in China because they become very popular in Japan. Yes.
There's a question about the mustard seed garden. Did that?
Yeah, mustard seed garden. Yeah, this is the most popular painting menus. Actually, mustard seed garden. This is in China and also later in Japan. the Chinese people study the painting actually, and lots of people just start studying master gardens. Yeah, this.
Yeah, so going off of these questions, so when they, I know it was some of the most famous, oh I got it, was some of the most famous Japanese artists who were like ukiyo-e printmakers, like Hokusai I know was real famous for, I don't know if he started this tradition, but they would release books of their sketches as prints, and they would call those the manga. Is that was the manga a precursor to that? Because the name sounds really similar.
This is actually different.
Yeah.
It's a manga and a manga is different. The manga is the term, is now we all know the kind of this term, but it is the stuff from Hokusai, just like you mentioned, it's the ukiyo printmakers. And this is based on his kind of drawing. Actually, the manga at the first time, so manga means the painted scenes usually is not kind of the formal themes you will see in the painting, just record the everyday life of the people and in the normal kind of settings. So in the Hokusai manga, you will see that depict the people in the many kind of different kind of activities there, and also in kind of very sketchy kind of the way to depict the people. So it's not kind of very formal. The manga at that time, not very formal and also very broad. This kind of that's called manga. So the manga at the time, that's first used by Hokusai to indicate the later this manga used by Japanese in a slightly different way, that turned into more kind of a comic kind of the style of art. So yeah, but the Hokusai manga also printed, and because of here the woodblock printmakers, so his most of the work in the woodblock print kind of format. Although he had also painted the Nihonga style painting too.
Thank you, everyone, for your insightful questions and for your wonderful responses. Please join me in thanking our speaker, Dr. Shen, for his presentation. Now, before we adjourn for our 10-minute break, we have a very special guest here right now that I would like to introduce and invite him to say a few words at the podium. I'd like to introduce Mr. Harry Papp, son of Marilyn A. and Elroy Papp. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Janet. It's fun for me to see everybody here today and enjoying both the presentation and then unrolling the scrolls. My mother used to love this. This was one of her happiest days of the year. So we're really glad we're able to keep this going. It's a nice way for me to think of my folks. They loved the paintings. They were very fortunate. They'd been involved with Phoenix Art Museum for a long time, and they got to work with Dr. Brown, Dr. Baker, and some of their colleagues, and they really guided my folks in building a great collection. And Rose and I are really pleased that we were able to make at least some of them come here to the Phoenix Art Museum and be available. So thank you for coming. We're glad you're here, and I hope this keeps going on for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Harry, and for joining us this morning. We will now adjourn until 5 minutes before 12. I have 11:45 myself. Somehow, in technology, we've not all gotten our phones synchronized. And before we do that, let me just mention a few housekeeping things so you can prepare accordingly. While we're viewing the paintings, you will be asked to leave all possessions on your chairs, except perhaps your phone if you might want to snap a photo. That would include water bottles and pens, paper, and such. So now's the time to drink up and also use the restrooms outside and be ready to do so. And one other thing I should mention, we have a few people who have very long hair, which is loose right now. what often happens is if you bend over the table to look at the paintings, the hair will sweep across them. So I encourage you to either tie it back if you don't have means to do so, tuck it into the back of your shirt, and that will probably alleviate the problem. Thank you so much for your cooperation, and see you in 10 minutes.
Okay.
We are aging.
Come around to this side of the table. Come around down here so you can have a look. And we wanted to show this painting right at the beginning of the viewing session because this was one of Marilyn's favorite paintings. Of course, those of you who knew her remember that she loved cats. And so this is by Hu Jiemei, one of the artists mentioned in the talk. Professor Shen, would you say a few words?
Oh, not much to say.
Not much to say.
Yeah,
But come close. The whole idea is that you come close. You're welcome to use your phone. But come close and look.
Went to Japan twice in the early 1870s and later in the 1890s diary. He was a painter in China. Actually, we should say it's not a very famous painter, but it's related to many subjects. This is the tiger painting the first time to see, because this painting painted seems the inscription, especially the indicator he came from the Qing China, the Qingguo, and also the painting painted in the Japanese city called Kurashiki. So that this painting certainly painted in the second time in Japan, and in the Kurashiki he stayed there. So that's also he was quite even in Japan quite strong emphasized his the national kind of identities here. Sign his name quite often in the Qingguo. It means the Qing from the country of Qing, and also sometimes they write called Zhonghua. It means they refer to the China. So here sometimes just sign the Zhonghua Hokkien, sometimes the Qingguo Hokkien. It's showing kind of very strong kind of national identities there. And but this painting, that's the tiger painting, possibly, which is yesterday talked to Dr. Julia Andrews about the tigers. The painting appearing in the Chinese circle. Not very often we see some tiger painting in China. Although you do have the occasions, but this kind of painting is very popular, and the subject is very popular in Japan. Start from kind of early. So this subject seems just for him possibly also new, because we didn't see his early painting deal with this subject, the tigers. So this is quite interesting kind of painting, very unique. The title here, this is the painting dedicated to the one the Japanese name is Ohashi and the Dachao. So and also the title for the painting is the power of this tiger, actually above all other kind of animals. The Bai Shou, actually Chinese use Bai is indicated many lots of the animals. So this is the special kind of titles for this.
So I should add that some of these paintings have been published. This one and the next one we're going to see were published in a catalog called Scent of Ink. And I have made some scans of these. So those of you who are students in any of the ASU classes will have these scans available later today. But just to add that, we in these publications we went through to translate the inscriptions, and this one was rendered. It's the inscription. Its fierceness stirs awe among hundreds of animals. description of the tiger. So I think that was always an attraction. So I think what we could do, here's Carrie. Carrie, we could, yeah, we could actually move the tiger down to this end of the table and put the next one at that end. Or vice
I think that would be a great idea, yes. Thank you.
We'll just need people to scoot a little bit when we
Yeah, let's put the new one here, and then we'll switch around.
Well, I have one other suggestion I'd like to offer to everyone. Due to the number of people, not everyone can be at the front of the table to see the paintings in their best angle. So if you would look at the paintings for a few minutes close to the table and then move back so that the people behind you can move to the front. So we're going to sort of rotate, being at the front of the table and being at the back.
Let's see, Carrie, we can go ahead and put the second
I
painting
just
on.
need folks to move so.
Oh, okay, so we'll clear out, I'm gonna put this over here. That the artists in Shanghai had such a close connection, not only going to Japan itself, but also with the Japanese who came to Shanghai. I suppose both for business reasons and for and for artistic.
And there's so many people, and also so far we gather information about the Chinese art market and also the other things from the people actually doing the business in China.
Should we talk about there's a title handwritten on this particular scroll. This one is the Wang Yin scroll.
Yeah, this also including your catalog.
Yeah, I have to walk that way.
Okay. What's your time? You translated
Yeah, we did a translation of this, of the inscription here, which I'll read. I'll go ahead and read. It's not just the light, the print is too small. It's called The Evening Moon at Kamogawa. This is how we wrote it. My heart no longer stirred by fame and fortune. Instead, I linger amidst the beauties and wine. What enticed me the most was Kamogawa's evening moon. Counting by the fingers, it is already the 4th time around. In the night of the full moon, the 2nd month, the 8th year of Guangshu, which is the Chinese rain name, green mist descended upon the trees, while the golden mirror of the moon ascended to the firmament. I opened the bottle and enjoyed a light sip. After becoming drunk, I held a brush and wrote or painted what I saw as a record of a moment of exhilaration. Wang Ye, this is who was mentioned in the lecture, of Jitling, Nanjing, so inscribed this. That's how we're going to do it. Would you like to comment? It's upside down.
I'm just seeing the moon from the poem right there, and which is becomes very popular. You often see moons in 19th century Japanese paintings, but you don't so much in Chinese paintings before that time. Okay. And then they begin appearing in Chinese paintings in the early 20th century, particularly among artists who had some connection with Japan. I mean, there are so many Chinese poems about the moon that you don't see it occurring in Chinese paintings very often. I mean, of course, Shenzhou's watching the mid-autumn moon in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston has a
Yeah. Later, when Shanghai artist Tao Leng became the special, like in kind of depicting the moonlight. Yeah, he's the Japan.
Sorry.
Tao Leng.
Oh. the painting dated 1882. 1882. And do you notice something special about it? What are the materials for these two? This is on satin.
On what?
On satin.
Important, yes.
And this is on silk. Yeah. This is on silk. So there are two different supports for the painting. So both have a lot of use of wash that tends to blend, but this one, Professor Zhou, when he wrote about it, said it's very much in the style of Mi Fu or Mi Oren, the Mi style from the late Northern Song, but that it doesn't use dots, that the artist has sort of avoided that cliche of, sort of overused, excessive dotting, but instead, this atmospheric effect. Now this is an interesting confusion for me, because you mentioned this artist in your lecture,
yeah.
but I didn't realize it was the same as this artist.
Oh.
And now you see this is a big problem, because many of these painters used different names at different times. And so yeah, would you comment more on that?
Quite often he used this Wang Ye, or his real name Wang Yi, and in the formal record it refers to Wang Yi, but in the article, no Wang Ye. And we talk about the satin. Actually, we find that when we study in Japan, we see the many kind of Chinese artists who work collecting in Japan, especially in some large collections, a large collection called Kanpokan in Japan. There's so many works actually artists when they paint in Japan use satin. So possibly this material at that time, the satin for the painting is very popular in Japan. That's what Chinese started the countries. Possibly under the painting at that time in Japan they use that material.
To use the satin.
Satin, yeah.
Because you can imagine how satin allows the ink to spread a little bit. Would you comment?
Yeah, that's my question too. Yeah, so I wonder if the material choose is based on like a preference of like the finishing effect, or it's based on the production chain. Like, is it like easier to accessible, or it's like higher value so people appreciate it more?
I think it's possibly, I would say possibly it is a people condition this painting, what they like. I think that time possibly, we see so many paintings on the satin by these kind of people, including the Japanese artists at that time, also use the satin quite often. So the possibly that time the popular kind of materials for the art collectors they appreciate, or for the artists they appreciate. We don't know, because for painting actually satin is not ready to paint like this. So.
I apologize. I was curious in regards to the materials used, if they would affect the saturation, the vibrancy of the ink.
Yes, they do. Actually, like they mentioned here, this when the ink that's Chinese painting ink mixed with water, right? They put on the satins because the fabric, the texture going to the different directions. So they have to handle this brush in a different way to make this ink. This is not the paper. The paper is very absorbing. Can you put it down? You cannot change much. Can let it absorb immediately. But the satin you can see here. I think the Dr. Brown just pointed out that they didn't have any kind of other follow this kind of so-called Mi-Fu style. Usually it's a Mi dots here. But here we didn't see any kind of Mi dots, and only kind of ink wash, kind of long, the texture looks very much. It's not even the so-called the hand fiber texture, hand fiber textures, and that kind of that's used kind of ink wash, long ink wash. So not very often we see. I think that possibly artists are still not really comfortable or familiar with this material itself. I think that when he was in China, I don't think that he used this kind of material often. So that's why, to me, this the mountain painted in this way is a little bit awkward. I don't want to say it's very successful. So I think that possibly the artists are still struggling with kind of material they have to deal with. That's why I think the material possibly chosen not by artists, but by the commission, the people commissioning. Sorry, I don't. This is my inception.
Yeah, the patron.
I'm sorry to disturb, but I also have like one question a little step further, because also we see a lot of like gold foil attached painting and people like paint on top of the gold foil. So is it also similar to like it's like commission-based decision making, or it's like more to achieve like the premise of a smoother surface? Because like for satin, if it's like freshly made, it's supposed to be like reflective and like smoother compared to silk. So I don't know, it's my guess too, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, answer the question about the painted on the gold foil. Actually, this is the paint from Momaya period, because that time the use gold foil had many different reasons. I think it certainly is based on the patron commission. People commissioned this kind of artworks. First, gold foil used for screen painting. So the screen painting for gold foil, we say the one is that time the commissioners kind of painting. They are the generals, these kind of this shoguns in the large castle, all the rich kind of the temples. The commission the kind of gold kind of foil kind of screen painting. But this is the one way to show it. They use the luxury materials, the gold foil. The second, we also say this the gold foil in this kind of the interior space. Actually, they also have a very functional way. It reflected the illuminated lights from the outside. If you go to this kind of castle, I don't know if you have it linked to this kind of the castle. Inside actually really dim and dark. So this kind of the gold foil, actually the screen inside divided space in the interior actually also reflected the very limited lights from the small windows. Castle has small windows, so it's also very functional. So this kind of the tradition start from Roman period. Maybe the gold foil kind of one very important kind of materials used, especially for the screen painting. I don't know.
So would you say that this style of rather loosely applied ink washes, does that speak to a Japanese taste a bit more?
Yeah, I think Japanese we see these kind of mounting in this kind of the way. Also in some Japanese artists are doing the same thing. I don't know if it's because of this the materials itself it's limited their kind of the way of the use kind of ink, and also the brushwork applied on the surface to cast this all on just I think for Chinese artists it certainly seems it's a process to familiar with this new material for them.
Now, the next two paintings come from a different group of artists that were not represented in the lecture. These two artists were from the Guangdong area, Canton, what we now think of as the whole Hong Kong region. And they went to Japan for, well, I should let you speak about this. Tell us about the arrival in Japan of some of the Lingnan artists. Would you like to comment? We have two artists, Chen Shuren, and then we'll have Gao Jianfu. So these are later paintings, 1930s, and this is even 1940s. But the two artists were both in Japan at the very beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah, Chen Shuren is one of the very important person, not only as an artist but also as a politician in China. He was the friends of the founder of the Republic of China, Kuiyi Shen. Start from the beginning when the anti-Qing kind of revolution. So he actually the link to the artwork start from very early, and he married the granddaughter of one of the most famous Qing painter Ju Chao. At the time, the Ju Chao, the Julian were the two most famous artists in Canton areas. and it's also called the Lingnan area. So he married this granddaughter of the Ju Chao. You can see the direct link to this Canton kind of artwork. But he had also in and out in the artwork because he's strongly involved in political kind of with the activities with this, the early revolutionaries in terms of this kind of overthrow the Qing court and establish the Republic of China. But he also studied in Japan. He would really, compared to the later, was showing another artist, Gao Jianfu, there's a little bit of controversy about where and when he studied in Japan. The Chen Shuden really studied in the Kyoto Art School, actually for several years. And also later went back to Japan again and to study in the literature actually in Tokyo, the Kyoto. So he, but in between, he is always involved in many kind of political activities. Became the Sun Yat-sen's one of the major assistants, and also became the officials in the reported period. But his painting, I think that because he had a close relationship with Gao Jianfu and also with the Ju and Ju Chao, so he was considered one of the founders of the Lingnan school, usually always called the Tu Gao and the Wen Chen. So his painting here, we see, seems to not really follow the very traditional Chinese ink painting style. And because he studied in Kyoto at that time, certainly strong influenced by Japanese kind of so-called Nihonga painting, and also possibly the Western style painting too. So there's no matter his brushwork, and also the composition, and also the use of color, we see it's not necessary to follow any kind of category or the specific kind of style of Chinese painting of the early time, even with its contemporaries.
Most landscape paintings, the figures wear long gowns, even in the 20th century. But if you look at these figures have backpacks and are wearing Western style, possibly military garb. I don't know. In case they're dressed for hiking.
You guys can move away from the table, please.
So, a question came up here about the mountings. This is not exactly a traditional Japanese mounting because it doesn't have the strips that we usually see. But on the other hand, the thickness of it, the choice of surround fabric, and the inscribed box.
Yeah, just entirely the box, this is quite typical in the Japanese collectors. They're custom, so we see that always this time there's a very kind of sometimes give you the idea and the details about how they get this collections in their hands. And also sometimes they even ask the famous people to kind of write the things on this kind of collection box. This is a very good way. And yeah, Dr. Brown talked about the mounting. I think this is not very typical to the Chinese, the Japanese mounting without the tools here. But it's possibly referred to the so-called Chinese Song style mounting. Yeah, Songbiao. Songbiao actually very much like this. The Japanese mounting is developed from Songbiao. So the add more things there, and also the materials used are also slightly different. But this is the kind of refer to Songbiao. You have the two, this, but without this one. This is what but the format is following Songbiao.
One thing I think is so interesting in comparing these three paintings is the way the mountain landscapes are depicted. Particularly the monkey painting a minute ago was, but this one Chen Shun is much more using, well, at the time, his style and then the Lingnan painters was called eclectic. That is, it's a hybrid of Western and Chinese techniques. And you can see that he's, unlike most literati painters, he'll start with a rock and then gradually expand out bit by bit until they have the entire landscape. He's quite clearly laid out the landscape in advance and sketched it in with pale ink underneath, and then come back with the larger, bolder strokes, and then added colored wash rather than the ink texture strokes that we see in the other landscapes. So it's a kind of cross between Western watercolor and a traditional Chinese landscape. And of course, this subject, I don't actually know whether he was in Sichuan at that time. I suppose he must have been. Do you know? But in any case, this is right. This is a scene from Sichuan, which was where the nationalist government was in exile during World War II. So it's a place from the actual experience of the government that he served.
Yeah, presumably because the painting was done in the 1940s.
Yeah. So because he served as a government official, but he was in Canada for many years. And I know our library has a book of his poetry. I think it was self-published poetry. Half of it's regulated verse, and the other half is English sonnets on the theme of like Niagara Falls and things like that had to do with his travels across North America.
Could we get you to comment on Gao Zhenfu? Either, both of you. This is from, these two paintings are from Jeanette Chamba Elliott, who gave a large group of 19th and 20th century paintings to the Kuiyi Shen Museum. And she was very interested in some of the contemporary artists like Liu Hosong and Hong Kong Lei, but she also really wanted to collect historical paintings. So, yeah, could you give us your comment? I should say that one is not published. This one was published in a catalog that we did, and again, I'll post it for you all who are in my class or your college class. It was published in a catalog called The Modern Spirit of Chinese Painting.
Gao Zhenfu, as most of you probably know, was considered the most important artist in the Lingnan school, but it was actually a group that consisted of him and his brother and Chen Shun and some others. But he, by the latter part of his career, he was openly advocating for a new Chinese painting, and that was to be, as I just mentioned, something that brought in the good points of Western art into the tradition of Chinese painting. But he also studied in Japan in the early 20th century, going there around 1903 or 1904. There's been a lot of work to try to track down where he studied, and Japanese scholars have spent a lot of effort on this, and we tried as well. Nobody can find any registration at any school that he actually formally enrolled as a student, but he obviously learned a lot from whatever means he studied painting when he was in Japan, because the way he painted rocks and mountains, the outline strokes and texture strokes changed quite a bit from his pre-Japan to his post-Japan period. And so you see these kinds of rectangular strokes have become his kind of hallmark way of painting. And you see it more obviously in other paintings, but this area here where you see the rocks look sort of like piled up square boulders or something. And you do see that in some of the Nihonga landscape paintings of the period.
Oh, you do.
You do. So,
the Japanese traditional.
Oh, the 20th century Japanese painting. So he, I think he got that from his experience in Japan, and then he did always put a lot of effort into trying to depict man-made parts of the landscape accurately, whether it's architecture or airplanes or whatever. Yeah, and this little pavilion there is quite carefully and accurately.
So would the lack of information about his stay in Japan be related to his political involvement? Because wasn't he also interested in the overthrow of the Qing?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Professor Shen probably has more to say about this, but he was, he did join the Alliance Society, which was dedicated to overthrowing the Qing dynasty. And according to some accounts, when he was actually asked to go back to Guangzhou while he was in Japan by the Alliance Society and set up a front, which was a ceramics shop that actually was a bomb factory. And they, had a bomb factory in the back. It was a terrorist organization. and they did actually succeed in assassinating one of the Manchu officials with using a bomb. Which they later published in a new record. After 1912, with the new government set up for about a year, they had government funding to publish this lavishly illustrated magazine. It was a combination of art and politics. It was quite typical of his interest, but a little strange as an editorial policy. And they actually published photographs of the assassinated official, along with their own paintings. So it was very much a revolutionary kind of dedicated to political revolution as well as artistic revolution. But that might very well have been why he kept a very low profile in terms of being able to find him and identify him.
Let me just briefly mention that Dr. Andrews' particular area of specialization and her groundbreaking book, produced a few decades ago, was on painters and politics, primarily from the 1950s to the 80s, right? Am I correct? Yes. So, and this is an area that's very dear to her heart, that interaction between art and politics. What we'd like to do now, in the interest of time, because this always runs a little over, we have 4 album leaves to show. So we're going to quickly but carefully roll these scrolls up now. So take a last look while they're being rolled up. And then bring out 4 album leaves of an album by Shen. So we're going to be taking a little step backwards in time by a century or more. And I'd like to mention that this particular artist, Shen, we have 2 albums in Phoenix Art Museum collection by him. And the leaves of some of one of them are on view in the Asian gallery right now. So as we conclude by looking at 4 of them up close here without plexiglass, I encourage you, if you have time today, to go into the museum, go into the Asian gallery, make yourself dizzy in the Yayoi Kusama Fireflies room for a minute if you like, and then go into the next room where we have lovely paintings on view, all from the Papp collection, and that includes, I believe, about 7 or 8 wonderful album leaves by Shen and some complementary albums that also show works by artists who were influential or influenced by Japanese art. So I encourage you to conclude your day in the gallery. And thank you everyone for coming.
So the artist whose album leaves we're bringing out was featured in Professor Shen's talk. You may have noticed a beautiful image of 2 tall cranes with their necks very gracefully extending. And the Kuiyi Shen was lucky enough to have 2 albums by Shen Chuan, better known as Shen Nanping, and sort of the founder of the Nagasaki School of Painting. Would you like to comment a little bit on Shen Nanping?
Shen Nanping, although we don't know his life very much, because so little information about his early life and also his activities in China. But he became very, very influential in Japan when he went to Japan in 1731 and to 1733. He considered one of the earliest the Chinese artists that actually went to Japan during this kind of isolated period. And because at that time, the only Nagasaki, the only city actually open to the foreigner, especially to the Netherlands and also to China. So although they say that this kind of in the isolation period, but this city is very unique. It can accept people came from Netherlands and they came from China. So Shen Nanping was he was one of the artists at that time came to Japan during that time. After he came to Japan, we say that the Japanese under this isolation is already 100 years. That was about 100 years because the Japanese started the isolation in the Tokugawa period from the end of the Chinese Ming Dynasty, 1633. So when he went to Japan, it's about 98 years of isolation. But so this is the first time that the Japanese started to have this real Chinese artist in life actually came to Japan to paint the painting, showed his painting to the Japanese. Although we should say that Shen Nanping is not a typical kind of the so-called literati painting, this style at the time, but at that time everything comes from China to Japanese is the literati painting or Bunjinga. So they immediately turned this into the so-called kind of linked this to Nanga, Bunjinga. Although after he left, later in Nagasaki, they also have the people started to understand more. But anyway, he attracted lots of followers and even established a so-called Nanping school at this time. The Japanese called the Nanping High. And especially the one Japanese painter actually later established this Nanping school is called the commercial Huey. Commercial Huey actually established this kind of Nanping school with this under this name of the Shen Nanping. So his painting style, especially the very fine. Basically, his painting style very much like the Ming Dynasty core painting and the bird and flower style.
In fact, I would add that the inscription on this album mentions the Song Dynasty as a source. And I'm not sure this is true, but what people like to say is that the shogun in the early part of the 18th century, early part of the 18th century, wanted to have his staff go to China and bring back Song Dynasty paintings and bring back Western paintings. And they couldn't really do either one very well, so but they recruited this artist from Hangzhou who was skilled in a sort of revival of the Song style. And he made a success of it. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, his painting style basically in the middle Ming period, we know the Ming Dynasty in the core painting is very much appreciated Southern Song style, not some kind of core painting style. It's a very fine brush work and the beautiful colors, and also the themes of the painting in terms of this birds and flowers became very popular. This birds flower painting also deal with many kind of auspicious meanings here. Shen Nanping's painting also we see, and this album is not so typical. Many large hands for the paintings by Shen Nanping, and the deal with birds and flowers, and especially it's associated with many kind of auspicious meanings, no matter the flowers and also the this kind of other plants and also the animals always with this kind of, this is a very popular trend we see in the Ming Dynasty painting, not only actually court painting, even in the popular world you also see these kind of themes.
The leaf with the qilin has a little bit of gold, so if you're interested, take a close look to see there are little strands of gold in the fur of the qilin. Of course, we know it better as the kirin on Kirin beer, but it's it's the same mythological animal, right? But in this case, with that loving, motherly touch, with the cups, it's very interesting. And now the album with the mandarin ducks, that leaf is so similar to a painting in the palace collection. It was in the Qing collection. Now you think, Shen must have seen it. But we don't have any record, I think, that he saw paintings in the court collection. But he was from Hangzhou, so he may have seen other works that are similar. Or, maybe had connections. This album, I have to tell the story some of you remember back in the 1980s when we did an exhibition, and I brought the catalog, the Elegant Brush. We called it the Elegant Brush, Painting Under the Qianlong Emperor. And we had chosen this album from Dr. Yipi in Hong Kong. And he died while we were preparing the exhibition. But his collection went to auction, and we were able to buy this album for Kuiyi Shen only because Harold Wong made it known that this lovely little museum in Arizona wanted to buy the painting, and everybody should stand back. And they did, and we were able to buy it.
That was a nice ending.
Yeah. So, very happy for you. But Dr. Yipi's collection was sold for charitable purposes and went to hospitals. He was a medical doctor. Very successful sale. Let's see, where's Dr. Baker? Dr. Baker, would you like to, or how about our new curator? Would you like to say a comment before we close?
I left for a minute there, so I don't know the train of thought. And one of the things that I think this album serves to remind us very well about, and again, I encourage you to go into the Asian gallery. Most of what we see in Chinese painting, up to about the time of the end of this lecture, that was covered today, the 1940s or so, was never meant to be seen in a museum setting, to be displayed in a gallery the way we have it on display. It'd be viewed by 50 or 60 people at the same time. And when you go in the Asian gallery, you will see that we have two albums that are still bound together. That is, all of the leaves are still in a book format. So look carefully at that. And artists would paint those. There was usually a theme or a train of thought or a style that pervaded each of those leaves. And if you're very fortunate at some point in your life, you may have the opportunity to enjoy a Chinese album in its original context as it was meant to be enjoyed. And I treasure having that experience several times. And that is what the Literati originally did. What did they do? They had a lot of free time. They wrote poetry. They painted, they practiced their calligraphy, they played musical instruments, they wandered around, they drank perhaps a little bit too much wine. They didn't always do that by themselves. They liked to gather in small groups of like-minded people. And so an album would be something that you would treasure. You would keep it in a cupboard, in a nice carved wooden cupboard on a shelf inside, tucked away from the light, which is very dangerous and threatening to paintings like this because they will fade unbelievably fast, whether it be daylight or whether it be the lights in the museum gallery on these, because they are works on paper and silk. Instead, an album was meant to be drawn out when you'd invited, maybe 2 or 3 or possibly at the most 4 friends to come over in an evening. what did people do before there were rock concerts and videos and television? They filled their time by doing things like this. And you would invite a few like-minded friends over for the evening, and after you'd had a glass or two of wine, you'd say, perhaps you would like to see the new Shen album I recently acquired. And your friends would say, oh, of course. You would bring it out and place it on a table, and everybody would put their wine glasses aside, and then you would stand together, 2 or 3 or 4 of you, and look at it, and then comment about it. One might comment about the brushwork and say, another one might say, oh, I hadn't noticed that particular detail. And then they might read the poem out loud that was inscribed on it. And then the page would be turned, and you could fill up easily an hour doing this. It's sheer delight to be able to enjoy an album in that kind of context. Today we've perhaps moved a little closer to that because we've been able to look at them up close and share our thoughts with each other, which is a marvelous experience. So I thank all of you, particularly Dr. Shen and Dr. Andrews for sharing their valuable insights, but for each of you in sharing what you see, because we can all learn from each other. So thank you very much, everyone.